Welcome to episode number 39 of Seeking Focus.
Welcome to Seeking Focus, a podcast that provides photographers and videographers with a place to critically compare technology, share ideas, and enhance their skills.
Well. We've got another guest today. Who do we have today? Mr. Curtis Reed from Creed Media.
Well, you have to extend the read by two more characters because it's reader.
Oh, Reader.
That's right.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
There you go. Mate,
You clearly don't read my emails.
your surname is much easier to pronounce than my surname, that's for sure.
Well, okay, so I actually thought about that before So for the listeners, we actually had a shoot very briefly today.
We did.
Hence, we're now together afterwards. So now you have schooled me on the pronunciation of your last name.
I tried, yeah.
So
I tried to do a lot of people.
I have since rehearsed.
Oh.
And I'm now going to attempt this in front of you.
Show me.
And hopefully it meets the standards. So
I might beep that out.
Marty Matsushevsky.
Close, yeah, it's really good. Close. Matu, chef, like a cooking chef.
See, that's the
Ski.
note I remember, the chef part.
So Matu chef ski.
Matushevsky.
There you
So
go.
I added like two extra syllables that didn't need to be.
Yeah. It's
I
actually
overcompensated.
considering it's actually quite easy to talk, like to say it once you know what you're saying.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Well, look, welcome to the show, man. We have known each other for a couple of years now, and we discussed this podcast thing, but we never really came in. So today we actually did a job out in St. Bernard's College.
Yep.
So we did a bit of droning, and you did a full day of shooting. I think, was it full day?
Yeah, that was a full day of shooting.
Mate, I'm usually pretty stuffed after a full day, man. So I'm actually surprised that you actually want to do this podcast.
I don't know what it is, but maybe it's just like the end of year adrenaline of like you
Isn't it?
gotta be in the midst of like, okay, I got a gift buy, I gotta cater for stuff, I gotta think about writing cards, I gotta think about finishing up jobs, and just for some reason you just start inventing energy that doesn't exist. Why I was more, but man, like I've always been a listener of this podcast as well, so I was more than, and like almost sometimes the FOMO kicks in when it's like when there's mates of mine who we have mutual connections, and I'm like, oh, okay, so they got on before me.
So the mutual connection is Constantine from Constantine Films, right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. Is there any others that we know of?
I'm not quite sure. You might have to rattle through some names, but from my point of view, I think he's the only one.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, we've both used him for... That sounds like a bad way to say it, but we have both employed him to do some jobs for us and for some of our clients, and he top bloke, and I know you're listening, Constantine. So
yeah, shout out.
That's right, shout out.
No, that's great. Listen, so you've been doing video for a while now, actually longer than I have, right? Oh no!
If we're counting the days when my brother and I, as kids, would pull out the video camcorder that recorded to cassette tape and made our own funny home videos, I was at least 7 or 8 back then. But when I started to take it on in a way that would be considered a quote-unquote professional manner, you could date it as far back as 12 years old.
Wow.
So
it's in the blood.
It is in the blood.
It's, you know what? The funny thing is, you actually say, because we had a couple of other guys obviously on the show and obviously listening and everyone that sort of turns this into a career, they've been interested in it for a very long time, like since we were kids. So it must be something in the blood, something obviously in the air or whatever else. You just love doing what you're doing. You know what I mean?
I've always had a thing for the theatrics, and acting was actually on the cards for a while when I was much younger. I've done 4 years of training of it, but never pursued it, only just because the auditioning process is such a headache. And there are actor mates of mine who don't even call themselves professional actors, they call themselves professional auditioners.
Yeah, right.
Because you do far more auditioning than booking, and I don't have the patience for that. So I decided to find a career behind the camera as well. But yeah, but like the point I was making there is that, you know, I've always been some sort of in a performing mode when I was a child, and for some reason felt the need to have that captured via some form of medium that would do that. And of course that is the camera. And so the sort of the secondary skill that I didn't realize I was picking up while I was performing in front of the camera was how to actually work the bloody thing, and to how to construct a scene via an editing program. So back in those days would have been the very early stages of iMovie, and boy, that's a flashback actually. And so and so the fascination just grew.
Yeah, that's great. That's great, because since you mentioned iMovie, because I kind of started editing on iMovie as well, but I actually went back a little bit more. I don't know if you can remember. I did Pinnacle. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
No,
Pinnacle
I actually
editing
haven't.
software. Yeah,
right.
So that was a long time ago, like 20 plus years ago. And I just filming my own sort of, you know, stories, going aways and whatever else. And it just turned into, you know, I go, hey, you know, I love doing it, so why not? So, hey, we want to know about you though. So you're on part of the show. So
well, then again, you know, Evan's not here, so I feel like I have to assume his position and take on half of the interviewing duties.
Yeah,
so I might have to direct some questions to you as well.
By all means. How did Curtis start Creed Media? I want to know.
So Creed Media is very suitable for a podcast like this because it is yet another video production entity that specializes in producing informative, engaging, and creative content for any and all clients, and very much in the corporate field, but nowadays more have been transitioning into the narrative field and call it the arty-farty filmmaking. And so, and in the last number of years, maybe talking 5 or 6, Creed Media has narrowed down into a particular niche, which is to work with schools and school communities. And that really is thanks to one client in particular of whom I still work with today, and that is called the ACC, also known as the Associated Catholic Colleges. Now, this stems all the way back to my own schooling days, my high schooling days. I attended a school called Simmons College, which is based in West Melbourne, and it didn't take long for the school to recognize my intense passion for having a camera in my hands. So I would always put my hand up to volunteer, make videos for our like year 7 camps, father and son events, cooking competitions, whatever. They were game for it. They were like, sure, why not?
Great.
You know? And then one day in year 9, my art teacher pulled me aside and said, there is a governing body of schools that run these competitions, and we are hosting one of these events at our other campus. Would you be interested in filming this for us? And I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, like, what's the event? To which my heart then sank very briefly, because he followed up his response with, it's the annual ACC chess competition.
How exciting.
So I was already thinking about how can I butt out of this, to which then I think he could tell by the look on my face, to which he followed that up with, we can pay you.
Oh, okay then.
To which my next question was, when is it? What time do I start?
How do you make something uneventful? I mean, look, I love chess, but how do you make something like that exciting on the video? That's the question. Especially when you're sort of that young as well.
Yeah. I think maybe I didn't worry about that at that time too much, just because I was over the moon to be paid for something at all that I do with a camera that I considered to be a side hustle or a passion project. And also the fact that I'm a year 9 student and the school is paying me to do something where, you know, I'm sort of tossing up these equations in my head going, is the school even allowed to do this? And I definitely use that as a flex to my classmates at the time. But in answer to your question, I think the nature of the event itself actually helped boost the energy of it, because there was just it was held in this big church auditorium, and it's just a sea. It's like an exam room. It's a sea of students who are just. It's so fascinating how you have a room full of hundreds of kids, and yet it's so deadly silent.
Yeah.
And all you hear is the rattling sounds of clocks going off and chess pieces being moved across a board, and how that the reverb of that creates an ambience in the room. It doesn't help the video, of course, because you don't capture that audio, but yeah, there was something about it that was actually just quite staggering. And so the rest you have to rely on the movement of the camera. Like filming a chess competition and the camera's static, yeah, it's game over.
Yeah,
like
I know. It's not easy.
You might as well film a snail, you know. So, but I was just really excited at the time. Anyway, the gentleman that I met there, who ran the ACC competition, his name was Paddy, and he noticed what I was doing, and he took some interest in it. I even interviewed him while I was there, you know, just to talk about what this is. That's actually another way to make it more engaging, is like, well, I'm not going to film chess pieces all day. I'll interview some people to talk about
That's great.
filming chess.
Well, you're thinking about it from a different perspective as well, and obviously, you know, just, you know, shooting a close-up of a, I don't know, rook or you know, knight or whatever else, you know, it's initially it's exciting, but you know, you can't just use that.
Well, you start to unlock more ideas as to how, because then the arrangement that I then had with ACC many years going forward was that it meant that I got to reattempt these shoots over and over and try new things, which I'll get to in a moment. So Paddy exchanged details, and I was excited because, like, oh, this is the first business card that I've collected. But at the same time, I kind of thought no more about it. I was like, nah, this won't eventuate. Literally 2 weeks later, he rings me up and is like, we have a cross-country event coming up. Would you like to come along and film with your school as well? And I was like, sure. And so...
So at the time, though, so let me just ask you a question and hold that thought. Because so at that time, did you actually have any experience of filming anything, and what equipment did you use? Because people will be interested to sort of hear is, you know, you don't have to have top-notch FX6s and FX9s and, you know, whatever else to be able to create something interesting, right? So tell us sort of, you know, what equipment did you use for that? Because, you know, if you're going to get paid for something, you kind of got to show a bit of flex to, you know, to the
credibility.
Client.
Yeah. So back then, I filmed on a Sony XF100, which is a camcorder, which by far is the grainiest footage you will ever come across. It was, looking back now, it was a hunk of junk. And a Panasonic, now I have to get this right, GH2.
So you had two cameras. Wow, impressed. Okay.
I know, right? How about that?
That's pretty good.
With a 50mm lens, and I remember those shots being overexposed the entire time and just not noticing it until I was in the editing bay. And this gear was owned by my dearest father.
Oh.
So that's kind of, I guess, the other thread of how I got into this. So my family we're all creatives. We all run our own businesses. My mum's business is not necessarily in the creative realm, but she runs her own business in management consulting. My dad and my older brother are in business together, also in video production, but in a different sort of branch. And so, but it was Dad that sort of kicked it off. I mean, he got into video production maybe 11 or 12 years ago now, self-taught, and my brother then followed suit. And so it was bound to happen that I would pick up the passion for it myself. I mean, I'm only surrounded by
keeping in a family or what?
Seriously.
But you know what's great though, because if the mum is not actually part of the sort of creative sort of space, you can ask her business questions, and you can ask her, you know, different things. You know,
she has been a lifesaver from a business standpoint. So I've had a separate video production business that it didn't last too long, but she was basically our consultant for that, in establishing a memorandum of understanding and contractual agreements and understanding salesmanship and approaches to clients and how to maintain client relationships. She's been all over it.
And that's the thing. Yeah, that's great, because you know what? Like, I've learned a long time ago when my first sort of sales job was by one of my mentors as well. And they go, you know what? Sale is not a sale until you actually get paid.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So a lot of people are saying, oh, I've got all this work coming up, and are you actually getting paid? Because I got stooged in the past by clients that they don't want to pay me as well. You know what I mean? So everyone sort of comes across all this stuff. But if you have that sort of figure that's behind you and helping you, if it's a mum or if it's some other mentor, it's fantastic to have on the side. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I actually thought about it the other day, how you gotta, in this business, just like a side note, you gotta keep your expectations low, because you hear those things all the time of, like, you encounter someone in the common trade or the similar trade as you, and you hear that classic, oh, it was great to work, we should work together someday.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, yeah, cool. All right.
Yeah.
Let's see if that actually happens. And if it does happen, great. But then if that's a client thing, I never fully trust the system until you see that invoice has now landed in your bank account. And you go, okay, these guys were actually legit. So that's probably a professional piece of advice for any up and coming videographers or even photographers that want to get into this business, is just hold everything at arm's length until you have that. It's sort of sad that you have to rely on the money to be the one and only factor to dictate whether someone's legit or not. But
look, at the end of the day, we all, like, that are in this sort of work, we all have to pay bills. We all have to put food on the table. We all have to, service cars and get to A to B to Z, you know what I mean? So it's unfortunately, that's how the work is, though. And a lot of people get excited and they get shafted, and,
That's right.
And I mean, look, it has happened in the past to me. I'm sure, you would have, came across one or two clients that I had
a client call me. Sorry, they never became a client. I should probably, they called me up and they were like, oh, would you mind doing this job pro bono?
Yeah.
And in the nicest
what does that
way
even mean?
Well, they try to sell you what you, as the service provider, will get out of it if you do it for free.
They all do.
And I'm just like, yeah, sorry, mate. I like the insurance to pay for this gear is still really expensive, so nah.
Yeah. And you know what? I actually had a couple of like that as well, and I was just like, yeah. The funny thing is, they turn around, they go, yeah, but we are a charity. I said, okay, that's fine. I'm happy to drop the price a little bit, but my price is still my price. You know what I mean? And there is some charities that I work for, they were more than happy to spend more money than that I actually gave them. You know what I mean?
You're a charity. Congratulations. I'm a small business.
Correct. Yeah, we all have to bloody leave. We all have to pay bills.
That's right.
So that's exactly right. I'm 100% with you, man.
Yeah. So to bring it back, so my family are all involved in one way or another, and because we're all in the same business, we all frequently work together as well.
Yeah, right.
And which is great. And we never have really been in a position of a level of disagreement that like throws a wedge in the relationships. We all seem to just be on the same page, either from a creative standpoint or just from a logistical point of view, even an administrative point of view. So we work really well together. And then so it was through that that growth and that experience and that exposure to filmmaking and equipment and gear and all that I was able to work on these videos as a child over time, or as a young teenager. And that obviously led me to working on that chess competition that day in 2013. And then onwards to this cross-country event. And so it was that cross-country event where I think it really sealed the deal for Paddy and the guy who runs the event. Yeah,
so you obviously showed him that you can do something, and he was obviously excited because you were young, and he didn't obviously have to pay you thousands and thousands of dollars.
I was probably like charging $15 an hour by that point.
But
I didn't know any better.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know what I mean? And everyone that's starting off a business as well, they don't know any better. And slowly, you kind of go, you're watching and seeing these other production agencies charging thousands of dollars, and you're charging them $100, and you kind of go, what am I doing wrong here? You know what I mean?
That's right.
So yeah, 100%. It all comes with time, unfortunately. You know what I mean? Like I've said it in the podcast, I've said it in real life. Everyone sort of looks at it and they go, "Oh mate, you got a Fix6, or you've got all this gear and whatever else, and you must be loaded and everything else." I said, "Mate, it took me years to be able to master this, to be able to control it, to be able to get my hands on half of this stuff." You know what I mean? So, mate, if you Paddy obviously saw something in you, and you had that sort of, how can I say, that way in, that channel in that sort of.
That I didn't even
niche.
know what it was opening up to at the time. I didn't realize how big of a step into that channel it would end up being, because then to close out that story, it's ended up being an 11-year relationship with these guys.
Yeah, right.
And Paddy sadly has moved on from that job, and he's now running his own business, but I'm still in touch with him and will very intermittently still work with him. But obviously the ACC must still go on. And so there's 2 new guys in there who are very lovely and who have been very understanding in continuing the process of these videos that we push out. So for more context, the relationship that I have with them now is that I produce at least anywhere between 25 and 30 videos for them a year, and they all consist of these mainly sporting events. And that can range anything from soccer, footy, table tennis, basketball, swimming, cross-country athletics, the whole jazz, right? And my job, with the assistance of some other camera operators, of which you've been there for me on a couple of occasions as well, is to just rock up and shoot it as creatively as possible. We're not like the live streaming crew that just sets up a static cam and films the games. I'm not into that. We get in the trenches, we're in the midst of it, and we get up high and low and up and around, and we create these highlight packages for the ACC to then push out onto their social channels, and it's very heavily used within the schools as well, especially schools that win these grand final competitions.
Oh yeah, they got the bragging rights, right?
Oh,
and
massively.
100%.
And especially in the footy department, I have to say, there's a lot of gigs where spectators, mainly parents, will actually show up to these footy grand finals. And look, they are at an elite level of sportsmanship and talent and skill set, as like you would see at a VFL or even an AFL game. And so I actually really, that and a couple other exceptions, but the footy seems to be my favourite gig because I get paid to not only film, but I get to watch a good game of footy as well. But there's so much hype around it, and the schools benefit from them when they win as well. It's a great piece of schools are very fond of their sport, and so they probably. They're overly fond of it, to be honest. They could dial it down, but it's a piece of history for them that they're really appreciative of.
Melbourne is obviously a sporting capital of Australia, essentially, right? So we are huge on footy, we are huge on rugby, soccer, and it's.
Which you filmed. You filmed some soccer games.
Yeah, I did. And netball as well. I mean, look, one of my big clients is the Australian Institute of Sport of Physicians, and I do like all the doctors and everything else come and to one location, and they all talk, and I'll film the whole highlight reels and photography and everything else. So essentially, sport is a really good niche to get into, right?
100%.
Yeah. So but
it's bloody hard work, though.
It is. Yeah, I've noticed that,
especially with the kinds of like instructions that I have given you that I've had to implement myself. Like you're not sitting on your backside. Like you gotta. It's a full day of running around, and one of the more major events is. The cross-country championships, the swimming carnivals, and the athletic carnivals. The athletic carnivals are hosted at Lakeside Stadium in Albert Park, so the big stadium. And because I get called back every year to do these videos, I have to come up with ways to change it up and be creative and find new methodologies that I haven't explored before to be able to shoot these things. And one year, I sweating my butt off because, I want to be like, okay, what does it mean to actually be on the start line with these athletes? The gun goes off and you, with every atom of your being, try and keep up with these kids as they do hurdles, and
with a camera in your hand, obviously, with a gimbal,
yeah. Mate, I was going for it. I was probably the fastest cameraman that day in the world, and
you got to take that edge,
yeah. But it came up really well. I mean, it was pretty shaky, but throw some stabilization on there, and the footage actually came up really well. But it's that point in time now where, it's 10 years later, I really am running out of ideas.
Yeah.
And so I have, if you had asked me maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I would have been very protective of this client, and the perfectionist in me would have come out in ways where I was like, no, I want to shoot as much of it. I want to edit all of it. It's my child. Do not cross that line. Whereas now I welcome... I'm handballing a lot of the jobs off now to other contractors, just because they're going to see it
from a different perspective,
that I know I haven't thought of before, and it's happened. And so, for this year was the first time ever where I did not, I wasn't present at the athletics carnival, and it felt weird. It did feel very strange. There were 3 guys who are good mates that took care of it, and they did a fantastic job.
There you go.
But the whole time, you're grinding your teeth, wondering, and you want to check in. In fact, one of them, this is an event that's live streamed, and so I would jump on the stream and I would look for them in the crowd. I would right, Zach, are you doing your job? All right, film that. No, you missed him. Oh, dang it.
But you know what, though? Yeah. It's unfortunately, when you're starting up a business, you want to play all the cards right. You want to make sure that you do everything yourself. You're involved in everything yourself. But when you sort of get to a stage where you kind of go, hang on, I've got to step back a little bit, and essentially, it might get a little bit less money, but I've got more time, and then I can focus on something else and whatever else. So then you kind of, a lot of businesses that I deal with, I've noticed that without the actual boss in the house, everything's crumbling down. You know what I mean? So one of my clients, I'll go there every single week to film something for him, and he goes, he went away for 2 weeks, and he's got 10 guys working for him. He does whatever, he got back and he goes, half of them had no idea what else to do because they ran out of work. And then he turned around and he goes, and there's plenty of work, I can tell you that. You know what I mean? So people just fluff around and do whatever they do. But there's just if it's not your own business, you're just not going to take that extra step to be able to, So you got to sort of make sure you push that mental attitude towards people that you employ and say, hey, I empower you to do X, Y, and Z to be able to succeed. You know what I mean? And then, obviously help them out and, do whatever else.
Well, you and I are more in the business of people than we think we are.
Yes.
And we are in the business of initiative, and where you have to think on the fly in a millisecond. And, it's one I only, and I'm sure we've worked with both of individuals of this nature where we feel like we have to babysit them through the process. And they constantly look at us for direction. And that's why you hear of the major studio productions where there's a reason why there's something called pre-production.
Yeah.
Because you want to have all of your conversations and queries in that season where, nothing's been shot yet. It's okay. We're still... Because once you start shooting, you're lighting money on fire.
Oh, yeah.
And... it just gets really expensive, and you can't have someone who faffs around constantly interrupting your train of thought because oh, what lens did you want on here again? Oh, I only told you 5 times before. You know, it's but look, I appreciate someone who wants to learn on the job and say like a work experience kid, which I've had on occasion. That's perfectly fine. But if you are going to call yourself a professional and you're asking these questions, which really you shouldn't be asking, and instead implementing your initiative, that's the quality I look for. So look, I'd like to regard myself as a nice fella, and when on the job, you know, I can be a bit of a tight ass sometimes, but only just because it comes from a place of wanting to do a good service to the client, maintaining a reputation, that is at a positive level, 100%. And that needs to be reflected by the individual that also wears this uniform as well. So I only expect the highest quality standard, and so
you should, 100%.
And so we're in the business of initiative, and so if you're in a room and you realize that oh no, that there's a guy out there who's got a dog barking, or there's an angle grinder, you know, don't just be like, oh, okay, that's annoying. Like, take the initiative to actually go out and ask very nicely, we're just shooting something here, would you mind holding off for 5 or 10 minutes?
Yep.
And 9 times out of 10 they're very obliging.
That's right.
And you know, don't look to the director or whoever. It's like, oh, okay, well, I guess we're in a pickle now. So I'm all about just getting stuff done.
Yeah.
And
but the thing is, when you're running a small business though, you have to be able to get stuff done.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I mean, you know, you're niching down on certain areas of the business and whatever else. You need to be able to be a professional in those areas. And like in the past, I said, you know, like our work is essentially, you know, 60 to 70% attitude.
Yep.
And then, you know, 30-40% essentially, you know, shooting. You know what I mean? Because the attitude is, you know, the main thing that will get you through it. You know what I mean? If your attitude sucks and you're not gonna, that client, that got you now, he's not gonna get you again. You know what I mean?
My dad says this: 2 things. 1, be really good at what you do, and the second one, try not to be an asshole.
Yeah. Asshole is a big thing, actually.
Because this business, and more prominently in the music industry, which is an industry that my dad also specializes in, it has a lot of nasty people in it, a lot of unpleasant shysters, you know, and and even now I can, and I'm actually curious to know if you've detected this yourself, having been in this business for as long as I have now. I'm not admitting to those qualities now coming out of me, but I can understand the pathways the doorways that are being opened up where I could choose to be that, just because of the nature of the people that we work with, and how this is a frustrating 100%. Medium that we're working with, and there's never an opportunity to work in a perfect environment.
No, that's right.
And so
every job has got its own thing, and I see what you're saying exactly. And yes, I have. I choose not to work with real estate agents. You know what I mean?
Great.
So I kind of, you know, I came across 1 or 2 that I just did not appreciate.
Yeah, right.
And I was just like, no, never again. You know what I mean? Even some builders, I've came across some builders that are kind of, you know, great what they do, but they're just assholes to deal with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to, if I have a builder approach me, and they go, yep, no worries, give me 50% deposit, and this is my price. If you don't like it, F off. You know what I mean? Simple
and I've always
as that.
wondered, like, where does that come from? Is it a viewpoint of how they see our industry as, which I can understand, is like, it's... Every time I look back, I kind of nauseate myself because we make videos for a living. It feels a bit like YouTube-y and content creation, but every time I then fall into that trap, I then have to talk myself out of that, because like, no, this is actually a legit business, and we literally watch hundreds, if not thousands of videos a day. They're all around us on our television screen, our computer screen, and our phone, and someone has to actually execute it and put it together. So,
and people don't understand that. And I came across a lot of people that I needed to guide them on that. So, you know, clients will come up to me and they go, oh, we just need you for an hour. I said, okay, my minimum is 2 hours. And this is how things are going to go, this way, this way, this way. And then, they go, oh yeah, but we can't afford you. I understand that everyone's got a budget. Everyone's got, money that they need to put in their own pocket, essentially. But at the end of the day, the camera gear that I've got, the camera gear that you've got, I'm sure you've got probably just as much as I do. And everything is insured. And I mean, but you kind of go, you need to be able to pay for that somehow.
Yeah.
You need to be able to pay for the insurance. You need to be able to pay for, certifications and all these different things. And like, the job that we did today, for someone like yourself that you're not certified operator.
Correct.
You won't be able to even take off. No. You know what I mean? I could take off because I'm certified operator and obviously I've got everything.
And I don't see why it would be necessary for me to do so because I'm not in that field. Yeah. Hence why I would call you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So that's my sort of next sort of point that I want to sort of part of the discussion is like I try to niche down to the drone component. You know what I mean? I want to spend money and I want to spend time and effort and certifications and everything else on to be able to do it. So, that's kind of my niche that I want to get into. I mean, I love my interviews still. I still, do microphones and lights.
But you've really built up this drone department and that would be like, what percentage would that be of your work now?
I'll probably say close to 50%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
not surprised.
Yeah. So, look, there are some clients that, but then when I turn around to them, I can do FPV and I can do a normal drone, they go, ooh, what does that mean? Can you show us? You know what I mean? And once they see the FPV component, for instance, they go, ooh, this is awesome. You know what I mean?
Well, even today, the clients at St. Bernard's, they didn't know it was coming, and you could just see the looks on their faces, apart 100%. From the ones where, you're flying through crevices that are,
Small.
10 centimeters wide, and they look like they're about to, the flop sweat hits them, but they're, you could just see, and isn't that just like, it's, we try to be modest and humble, but like that feels good when you see the look on their faces 100%. Of that tick of approval. Yeah. And like, oh, we're getting called back.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole idea. I mean, the way I see it, look, and I've got obviously a fair bit of clients now, but from, like once you establish a client and you keep them happy, they'll keep on coming back. Yeah. Simple as that. There is a couple of clients that I lost and it's fine. But it's all down to communication and obviously discussion. And look, sometimes it's about money as well. It's all about, but it's what they need to be able to see the value in your work. You know what I mean? At the end of the day. So, obviously, you're doing well. You've been in the business for a while now too. So, hey, what are you niching down to? What are you still going to sort of niche down to the sort of AECC thing?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So from the client being the ACC, from that generated all these school clients because the participating schools of the ACC were then noticing these videos after a few years and going, oh, who produces those? We could use some of those. And so word of mouth spread around. And
as it does.
By now, out of the 13 schools that participate, I have either worked or continued to work with 8 of them. And I discovered that similarly in the film and the music industry, it's a small world in the school industry as well. Not just in the Catholic system, but in all denominations, whether it's public, whether it's grammar, whether it's private, because teachers are constantly jumping from place to place. And so the word of mouth spread even wider. And so now I'm working for grammar schools and public and private. And there was even a Jewish school thrown in there at one point, of which I made sure I added a few extra zeros on my quote. And then I started to realize this is actually pretty good. And I wanted to be the videographer known for working for schools. And every time I would scroll Instagram and I see a school video that I didn't produce and it was by someone else, it would break my heart every time. It's like, oh no, the competition's still out there. But I discovered that it was a very strategic way to continue generating work because, one, the schools can afford it. They're a big enterprise.
Definitely can afford
it. Most of the time they've accepted my quotes, and schools are a canvas that is filled with so so many different departments in that it's not just about, can you make a video about our school? It's, can you make a video about our music recital? Can you make a video about our culinary competition? Can you make a video about our building facilities? You know, there's 100 different things you can make, as opposed to, say, a video that is all about, I don't know, a shoe shining company, you know, where it's only focused on the shoes and there's really nothing more you can make about it. So I was really, and, you know, I want to first, you know, put it out there that, like, I'm in a position of recognizing how very lucky I am as a young individual guy, where, you know, this job has been able to allow me to pay off all of my student debts. And I'm very aware of just how blessed I have been financially through this work. But it's through, like you said, it's like years and years and years of development. So, so I've been niching in that area for a while now. And then a project came by, which was, again, of course, out of all the clients that I have, it was through the ACC, where I essentially ventured into making my first ever feature film, which was a documentary about the music concert that they host every 4 years at Hamer Hall. And
Hamer Hall is the one that's in the city, one of the big sort of, give me more information. So if anyone, because we do have a fair bit of listeners in the States and Europe.
Sure, yeah. So along the Murray River, you've got Fed Square and you've got Art Centre. So Hamer Hall is part of the Art Centre. There's two different theatres, and the one that's closest to the river, it's a circular shaped theatre on the exteriors, and it's big, and like if you're performing,
essentially it's a place where all the performers go to be able to perform there, as in like more of an artistic kind of way.
So the MSO has been there many, many times. They have a residency there. A bunch of comedians and musicians perform there all the time. If you're talking, say, like maybe ballet productions, they're in the more prestigious theatre. I can't remember what it's called, but that's the so sort of the Big Brother version of Hamer Hall.
So it's more like a theatre as well.
Correct.
Yep.
So but the Arts Centre, you know, it's a 2,500 seat, you know, theatre, and what a privilege for the students to be able to perform at a world-class concert venue. Definitely. There's not many in Melbourne. There's that one, there's the other one, and then there's probably maybe like the Palais Theatre in St Kilda, which I think is the largest. So,
and the oldest probably too.
Yes, well, there was a point where, like, you know, crowds that were sitting on the balcony were told not to get up and dance because who knows what could happen. Exactly I think they have since mitigated that issue. And so, this project came along, and for context, I had filmed the last two prior to this one, and I just did, again, the same as every other ACC video, just a highlights package. But I noticed that this event is so monumentally massive that it was hard to justify squeezing it all down into a 5-10 minute piece. That I felt didn't justify every layer that you had to undergo to be able to execute an event of this size. And so by the time it was 2020, before COVID, I had pitched this to Paddy and his assistant. Even had my PowerPoint visual aids to accompany the pitch, and basically just said to them, 20 minutes, this is what I want to do. I want to follow some storylines and I want to be able to tell it like this, blah, blah, blah. Then the inevitable happened and that was shelved for a couple of years. But then it was 2022. We pick it back up again, and understandably so, there was some wariness from Paddy. I think what's really admirable about Paddy is that he is not going to be irresponsible about the dollars that he's spending, and he has a fantastic work ethic. He's still to this day the best client I've ever had, and he's been instrumental to my own career. Like, I don't think I'm sitting here right now talking to you without him, and my parents, of course. But Yeah, so he didn't greenlight it straight away, and I could understand why, because, you know, it's a lot of work involved, and yes, it's very expensive. So, but what essentially convinced him was, I said to him, how about you let me shoot one interview and I'll show you what it looks like, you know, multicam, beautiful lighting setup. And he agreed to that, and we shot it, and he came in to have a look, and right then and there, within 20 seconds, he looked around and just went, yeah, all right, go ahead, mate.
That's it.
That's how you get a green light for a feature film. Now, I need to also... it needs to be understood that I didn't know I was making a feature length at the time. I had set out for 20 minutes, maybe 30. But then I got the list of names of kids and staff that I needed to interview. It was in like the 90s, you know, nearly the triple digits. And I realized I needed to, I really need to scope this out in a much more professional manner than I've probably ever done before in my life. Now, thanks to being in film college for a year and a half, I got to learn some techniques as to how to approach pre-production in a way that means, like, we're not a sinking ship by the time we're filming.
There is a lot of work going into pre-production, right?
Oh my God.
It's just like, and the thing is, it's invisible as well.
And no one gives you credit for the work that
exactly
you do.
Right. Yeah.
No one cares. Yeah. So, to cut a long story short, it was 6 months of shooting, filmed 6 rehearsals. In that time, I followed 3 storylines, which were...
So what, 3 different students? Or
no, so 3 different ensembles.
Oh, okay.
So out of the entire concert, there were 13 different ensembles, and they can be made up of like a senior the ones that I followed, the 3 of them. So there was a senior stage band, a junior choir, and a drumline ensemble. And all of them had conductors or teachers that were really good in front of the camera. They were great in front of the kids. They were flamboyant. They were energizing. And so that I knew straight away, this is going to hold an audience who will, I mean, for one thing, love the concert itself, but will hopefully... be engaged throughout the film as well when it's done. And the rehearsals were lengthy as well. They were spread out very intermittently throughout the calendar, but the reason why is because it's so difficult. You're working with 13 schools here. It's impossible to have all these students in the one space for a few hours and in a session, because this is not a concept where each individual school is presenting their own item. These ensembles are mixed. So if you have like a 90-piece orchestra, you could have 5 students from St. Bernard's on percussion, 3 of them on bass, cello.
Yeah, right.
6 of them from another school on brass, and it's impossible to work
I'm
this out.
just thinking, right? Like, you're talking about all these different things. I've got no idea what we're talking about, right?
Yeah,
but,
sure.
You know, it's like, I'm just looking at a guy. That's a lot of work, man. And that's a lot of travel. And that's a lot of memory cards. And that's a lot of...
It was insane.
10 other things.
I had to purchase a 10 terabyte drive from Western Digital to be able to pull this off from an archival standpoint and from a speed standpoint, because my iMac machine was definitely on its last legs. I still have it. I really should be upgrading it right now.
Yeah, I just did.
Oh, well
but
done.
Like, you know,
I'll need to have a talk with you afterwards.
Look, I think what you did, when was it? When did you finish it? Last year?
Yeah, so I finished it last year, and we had a premiere in in September at Lido Cinemas.
Yeah, so that's an independent cinema.
Correct, in Hawthorne. And that was after a year of editing. And you were there. You were very kind enough to shoot some behind-the-scenes footage for me, which I eventually did edit up only quite recently. And that's I have to give kudos to you, because that now is a memory that I can hold on to
it's great,
forever,
though.
and it's one that I will hopefully look back with nostalgia when I'm rummaging through old memory files that have got dust all over it. And
you know what, like, I think it was such a really good idea to be able to do it in that cinema too.
Wasn't it a nice cinema?
It was fantastic. And you know what, I love those independent cinemas, like the Yarraville, and the one that we shot it in. They just have that sort of how can I say?
There's a prestigious element to it.
Yeah, but it's so small.
Yeah.
Yet it's, and it feels old school, and it's just like, like even the Yarraville. I flew my drone in Yarraville in the cinema there, and just looking at the 70mm, the projectors and whatever. They gave me a whole tour of it, and you know what, like, I just love that part of that job. I mean, just sometimes you end up in a Hamer Hall, and sometimes you end up in St. Bernard's College, and different things. So in that sense, it's just fantastic to be able to experience all the different industries and areas and people, and like going to these old school cinemas, and it's just brilliant. That's why I love it, man. So
it was actually reasonably straightforward to be able to get in touch with them and book it. And I discovered something called DCP file converting, which is the file type that you have to turn your film in to be able for it to be screened in a cinema space, which kind of freaked me the heck out, because I needed to have the film done on time for the screening, which was already booked in place a number of months in advance. But like the film was only like maybe 60% done in post production, and they needed the film like 2 weeks prior to the screening so they could test it and convert it. And for me, that's 14 days that just went gone.
Yeah. So hang on. So you had to. So actually, that's a really good thing, because I never came across any of this stuff. So tell us more about it, because then if you want to screen something in a cinema, if it's a small cinema or whatever else, do you just give them, I don't know, MOV or MPEG-4 or what do you normally do?
Yeah, so, I mean, this particular experience, I think it might put a downer, and I don't want any listeners to think that this is exactly how it's done, but this is just somehow it happened to me. So, Lido Cinemas recommended that I follow up a contact who is in charge of the DCP converting process, and he got in touch with me, and we arranged a meetup. I met him outside a shop front that was empty. It looked like it had been demolished by a car crash or something, because there was rubble everywhere. And out comes a fella in tracky dacks, long hair.
From the shop.
From at the back of the shop. Flip-flops.
Yeah, right.
And I said, "Are you so-and-so?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm the guy." And I thought I was
the
handing my hard drive to a hobo.
Yeah.
But he turned out to be legit, and so it was an No, it wasn't uncompressed, because then the files would have been way too big. So I gave him it was just a MOV file of ProRes.
Like a 4K.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It was a 4K timeline that was rendered out, and which definitely is an absolute recommend, because you want to see that sharpness that comes up in the screen. So 1080 would be fine as well, but like if you want to, I don't know, there was something about it where on the screen it just looked different to when you play it on my iMac.
So you give him that MOV file, and then he converts that into.
He goes away and converts it into DCP. So I wasn't there for the process. It was just a handover, and then I got it back from him afterwards. But
how big was the file? So we're talking about feature length, so 1.5 hours or whatever it was.
Yeah, it was 72 minutes. Ended up being 256 gigabytes, I think.
That's reasonable.
It's not too bad. I think he asked me to do a ProRes 4444 version as well, which bumped it up to maybe like a 600 gigabyte file.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
The hard drive needed to be relatively large. There is an option for one to do it yourself. I did explore that, but because it was the first time and there was so much hype around the event of the premiere,
you don't want to
I just didn't want to risk it. So, but I might dangle my feet in wanting to do it myself for the next round.
So can people actually see this now? Is it on YouTube?
It is on YouTube. Yep. So the documentary is called Accent on Music. So uppercase ACC, Accent on Music documentary, and it was released last year. So yeah, it's a look, I think it's a pretty good watch without trying to boost myself up, because the kids in it who I interviewed, they're really entertaining.
Yeah,
They're quite
yeah.
comical, and I think the topic itself is really interesting. We really try to boost the importance of music in education, and how it's not something that, when a school is experiencing a budget crisis, that governments shouldn't be turning to the arts department or music department to cut so easily, because you're removing something that is integral to their brain development as they grow up.
Actually, you did mention that in a documentary, right? That there is a part of the brain of a young person that needs that to be able to develop. You know what I mean? Correct. So yeah.
So there is. I mean, you can get deep in the weeds of it, but like the film features a neuroscientist who specializes in the music industry and brain development of young people, and she breaks down why it is just so crucial that kids should be encouraged to pick up an instrument and play and practice. And she in no way is saying that you then have to go on into a music occupation going forward, because that's near impossible nowadays. But the tips and tricks that you pick up from being able to understand notation, rhythm, performing, all of which you have to do sometimes simultaneously at once. You know, even just as simple as like your fingers are playing one thing on the keyboard, but your foot is playing at a different rhythm when you're pressing the suspense pedal, and then you might be singing at the same time as well. That is activating all the lobes of your mind, and that can then be, that's a transactional thing you can learn, because then you can apply those same skills in engineering, in mathematics, in cooking, in whatever it may be.
Pretty much any industry, that's right.
It's studies have shown that there is no other department of the schooling sector that is able to activate all of those areas of the brain more intensely than the music class, because every other class that students will take is quite one-dimensional. If you take maths or English or humanities, it's only activating like one part of the brain, or so. But whereas music, it activates all of them. So it's really important. So we go into that as well.
Yeah, that's great. And so it's accent on
music.
On music. So it's on YouTube if you search that, or if you look at Creed Media, that should come up as well, hopefully.
It's also on the Associated Catholic College's YouTube channel. So so that was a really a lovely thing to accomplish.
You would have learned so much through that process, I'm sure. It's it would have been a lot of sleepless nights, and it would have been terabytes of data. And
it's the last thing you think of when you go to bed, and the first thing you think of when you wake up. It's like unhealthily obsessed. Would
you do it again? That's the question.
I would do it differently. So this is the thing. So when you talk about learning curves, and our conversation that we had before about delegating, that's the first thing I would do. I would delegate more, and I would have a substantial crew involved, because...
Well, essentially you did this all by yourself, right?
You had a couple
of guys.
Selfish ego, I did most of it by myself, because I guess I wanted to see, could I take on the challenge? So I did about maybe 85% of it on my own. I have to give credit to a mate of mine, Zach, who you've met, who's also a videographer. He helped shoot the Hamer Hall sequences, as well as my old man, and also my dad mixed and mastered the film as well. Which was because of his music background, he was again integral to how. I mean, it's a film about music. You want it to sound good, so everything in the EQing department and mixing was essential, and it sounded fantastic in the theater. I was really, really pleased.
That's great.
But I did have a moment when I was sitting in that theater at Lido where I kind of realized there was no one whom I could really turn to high five and say, wow, look what we did that together. And I felt...
I see what you're saying.
I was a bit kind of sad about that. And so there's a psychological perspective that I picked up from this. And then there's just the logical perspective of one can't take on all of this on your own.
And you know what? It's just not easy to be able to find that person, though. No. Because I'm sure you got paid a little bit of money for the whatever else.
Yeah.
the thing is, though, the amount of money, time, effort, and everything else, I'm sure it was not even close to what you wanted to get paid. And that's how passion projects work, essentially, right?
Yeah.
You want to be able to create the best for the lowest cost possible, essentially.
I did financially gain from this project, but it was mates rates.
Yeah, of course.
And to be honest, that was the thing I cared the least about, because of this is a nice kind of full circle moment, because of the opportunity that Paddy has given me all these years. ACC was strangely my film school, because I got to learn all of these techniques thanks to being called back 30 times a year and try new things. This was basically my thank you gift. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. I want to make a kick-ass film for you. And that happened to also be his last year in the role as executive officer. So it was a great sort of send-off for him as well. The big crescendo event.
100%.
And so it was sort of a nice bookend for all of us. And I'm obviously still working for the ACC, but not as much personally anymore. I've been subcontracting a lot of those things out, because it really did feel like I can't do better. I can't top that. I can't do better than that. And so, we still obviously have an arrangement together, but it felt very appropriate as kind of like the father figure to start passing on the job down to his kids.
What kind of work are you into now? Like, are you still, obviously, you're still doing the ACC stuff, but
Correct.
I'm sure you're expanding to other sort of avenues, right?
Well, since the film was done, it opened up these synapses of, oh, that was fun. I want to do that again.
Yeah, right.
So the documentary space is one that I am very intrigued by. It's my favorite genre, because you are actually dealing with the real people rather than a narrative depiction of it with actors involved. That's still very fulfilling, and I've dangled my feet in that department a few times as well. But they're tough productions. They're really, really tricky. Whereas documentaries, you're in the real elements and dealing with the real people, and I just find great fascination in that.
100%.
So I tried to get my next one off the ground. I don't think it's going to go ahead, and I'm not allowed to say the name, but it was to follow an individual who's well known in the Australian music scene, and I think that was just a near miss, but that's all right. So look, at the moment, it's a strange thing to be able to contemplate, but I'm just looking around.
Yeah, right.
I'm looking for stories, and
so if anyone's got a story, then hey,
literally
contact Curtis.
Come on, I will be more than happy to meet you.
But you know what? It's so true though, because I haven't really done much documentaries. I did do one documentary, and that was a love job as well with this other guy, Anthony. It was a couple of years back, and I really genuinely enjoy doing it. Yeah, you know what I mean. And
why did you enjoy doing it?
You know why? Because it was just someone's life that I was documenting, you know what I mean? And that person was down in the gutter, and he was down into the lowest, we're talking about drugs, heroines, and
sure.
And he came out of all that.
The redemptive arc.
Yeah. And he helped other people, other males, because these days, everyone, social media, news and whatever else, how women are victimized and males obviously, doing all these bad things and whatever else. Yet there is a lot of things that males actually do quite well, and they don't get recognized for it. They don't get, like this guy, he, when he was young, and this documentary is on it as well, and I'm happy to post that onto the notes on the bottom.
I'm intrigued.
But I hope this guy shoot this thing as well. And this guy came out of literally, he offered his own house to give other guys to be able to, that were going through the hard times and all that stuff. And he basically helped them out with food, advice, legal advice, and other things, because, these guys, went through really hard time as well with, with drinking and drugs and whatever else as well. And he goes, I've been through it, and I'm happy to help you guys out. And, there's just not enough, I think, out there to do that for the male component. You know what I mean? I think a guy gets more hard time than a woman does. I personally think that, from that perspective, from funding, from all these extra things, and that's one of the reasons why I did it, because I said to him, I said, don't pay me any money. Yeah. It's not like I went through that hard time, but you know what, I'm seeing other guys that are basically going through a hard time, and we need to be able to show them and show other people that it's not a walk in the park.
That's right. That's a whole podcast episode in itself. But look, the gist being that you can walk past a bloke and just have no clue how hard they're having it. And this business has opened up, emotional pathways that we didn't want to go down, because of the perfectionism in us and the self-critical talk, and how it diminishes your mental health sometimes. And so you have to find an outlet to be able to hold it at arm's length, which is actually a really good point, because I think this is sort of a strange relationship that I'm having with my work, because the same year, last year, I made a very conscious decision to quote unquote, hold my work at arm's length and not get to a point of idolizing it. Like I'm nothing without it, sort of thing. And that is strangely the same year where I'm working on the biggest and the best project I've ever done to date. And so, yes, I did feel like if the project didn't work, then all hell would break loose. But at the same time, I don't know, there was just something snapped in my head where I just thought, if it all went away, I would be content. I just would find something else. Yeah. And I think, now this is at the privileged benefit of having grown up with wonderful parents who have supported me throughout. Yeah. And I want to be in a constant state of recognizing that people don't have that advantage, and their student debts are still following them, whereas mine aren't anymore. Yeah. And so it's having a posture of constantly being grateful for what I do have, and that when I do fall into a mental roughness just because of this business, it's understanding that my neighbor might have it so much harder. Yeah.
And that's the thing you got to realize, like I've noticed that with myself as well, is, there is a lot of ways that you can just basically throw the white towel in and you say stuff it, Yeah. But you kind of go, all right, let's take a mental health day. Yeah. And I love, you've saw, you probably, I shouldn't probably be mentioning it, but you saw my post on bees at the moment. I'm getting to beekeeping.
How about that?
And it's turned, like I've noticed that, and I mean, I'm not saying everyone used to freaking going beekeeping or whatever else, but I've noticed that, and everyone's got to sort of pick their own thing, where when I am with the bees, I'm only with the bees. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. You know what I mean? So I literally get into the hives, I look for that queen, I check the brood, I and it's just such a rewarding thing from myself. You know what I mean?
Do you find it therapeutic?
It is, yeah. It gets frustrating when they're not bringing you honey, but you kind of go, I got to feed you again. You know what I mean?
Come on, queen.
So I start laying some eggs and doing whatever. But it's something different. You know what I mean? My wife goes, "Well, are you going to the farm again?" I said, "Yep, just packing up the car and just taking off for the whole day." And you know what? All I can hear when I get to the farm, I can hear is zzz, and I can hear kangaroos, koalas, and like that's like kookaburras. There's so many different things, and it just takes me away from all these different things. You know what I mean? So it's just great.
So you've got beekeeping. Yep. I've got woodwork and carpentry.
Ooh, Nice.
That's something that has been developing since July.
Oh wow.
And,
Okay. So it's only fairly recent.
Very recent, because I took an attempt road trip from Melbourne to Perth.
Yes, I watched that. As in your highlights from on Instagram.
Yes, that's right.
Else,
and I shot a highlights, but I only got halfway because unfortunately I ended up in hospital and had to come home. Everything was fine.
I didn't know that.
But I was home so much earlier than I needed to be, and I had no work because I took the out of office hours.
Yep.
And so I was like, I've got nothing to do. But I'd always been fascinated by woodwork, and so I decided to initiate that. And with every cut and bruise and that I gathered on my palms and fingers, started to develop an interest in it.
Wow.
And so again, a skill that is therapeutic and is fascinating to me, and understanding the different types of wood, the different coats and stains and varnishes and sandpapers and textures and different shaped chisels. Apparently you can't, a flat chisel, yes, you can buy from Bunnings, which you would be very aware of.
Yeah.
But a U or V-shaped chisel doesn't exist in a normal Bunnings, and you got to go to an antique and vintage shop and pay freaking $80 for one V-shape. Like, the whole thing is crazy, but I'm so fascinated.
It takes you out of that, and then it puts your mind, thoughts, and waves and everything else on that different level.
Yes,
you know what I mean. So the same thing with the bees. You know what I mean? Exactly the same thing. So
which I think is a great piece of advice to give to anyone who is listening, who is in this same occupation, is have a side hustle.
Yeah,
because man, there's nothing. Yes, you could clock off for the day and just sit in front of the sofa and watch telly, but
and doom scroll
but again, I think scrolling is just, it's such a that's just not on for me, because I feel you're still in the territory of the video and photography department because you're scrolling.
That's exactly right. And I use it sometimes for motivation from a point of view of how, like, this guy did it this way, let me try to do it a similar way.
And that's perfectly
else.
fine. I think you got to have some healthy doses of that, but also do something that takes you away from the screen. And so whether it is woodwork or whether it is beekeeping or going out to the farm, I'm jealous of the farm though, man, because
mate, come down, man.
I would love to go down, because it's on the cards one day that I will live in Tasmania. And because half of my family live there, and so I'm there quite frequently. And every time I come back to Melbourne, I'm immediately, reminiscent and jealous of anyone who's living in Tassie, because that
Tassie
lifestyle is so quiet and it's peaceful. The landscapes in the valleys are just so admirable, and you can wake up and walk out onto your porch with a cup of coffee or a tea and just marvel at the land that you get to live on, and that's a dream one day. So I'm really I'm stoked for you, man.
That's good, man. All right, cool. We are timing wise, we're actually going quite well, but there's one more thing that I wanted to sort of do, and a lot of our listeners they want to know about your gear. So without sort of going into much details, give me more or less your favorites and your what microphones, cameras.
So straight up, I'm a Sony man, and you can't change my mind.
Suck it up, Evan.
That's right.
Yeah, go on.
I don't know about Evan's gears, but I'll actually, no, I am interested. Why? What does he shoot on?
Canon.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
I've been there, done that.
Stay in Canada, bro. You're not coming back until you have a Sony in your grasp.
I should probably sneak one into the suitcase.
That's right. So I recently switched from the Alpha models to the cinema lines. So had a bunch of A7 3s, 2s, whatever, and I've now got the FX3s. I'm jealous of your FX6 over there because I am looking to wanting to purchase one myself to complete the multicam setup.
I found that it's really good for interviews as a static camera, but on the gimbal, it's a pain in the ass.
Oh yeah, gimbal, no way.
So FX3 is definitely the way to go with that.
FX3s have been a game changer for me, especially the 4K 100 frames.
Yeah,
that has been fantastic. I'm sick of looking at, horrible pixelated zoomed in 1080 50 frame per second. It's just it's gross. And I rock the Tamron glass.
Okay, hang on. So how many bodies do you actually have?
You shouldn't have asked that. I've got no. It's because I'm going to sound like I'm bragging here, but I've got two A7 IIIs, I've got two RX 10s, and I've got A6400 and two FX3s.
Oh wow,
so
two FX3s,
7 bodies.
Okay. Oh wow.
So if you want a multicam interview that uses all 7,
call Curtis.
The one documentary I can think of where it uses like 8 or 9 camera angles is I'm probably not allowed to curse on here, but it's The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F on Netflix. If you watch, I actually went through the process of going back and counting. I think I counted 9 angles that was on this one dude. Wow. And so since then, I've been trying to break the record. But no, like half of these cameras I don't even use unless they're for long form projects and whatnot. So, but they're all Sony. And I rock on the Tamron glass, which people seem to bag more than I thought they would. They're really good lenses, man.
I agree. The only thing with Tamron that I found, it's to the feel.
Yep.
It feels a bit cheapy. That's all.
It can feel that. Well, it depends what models you're looking at. So I've got the G2 models, which are the more newer ones, and I think they have since corrected that feel.
Okay.
But at the same time, the weight distribution compared to like how you hold a Sigma is much heavier and feels more expensive. So I feel like they're both one and the same. Maybe the Sigma comes out on top a little bit, but if you rock a 70 to 200 Tamron G2 lens on a Sony FX3, the image is pure. It is mint. And I've owned that glass set for as long as 5 or 6 years now.
Wow,
and I've really learned a lot about good lens management and protection and understanding
it's a big thing.
So I'm cleaning and dusting them all the time now, probably a bit too much, and
after every shoot,
honestly, pretty much. And so, but that's like, if you want it to last and if you don't want to keep spending, then you got to do that. Some other gear, I don't think there's really. Oh, look, there's actually a monitor that I'm quite sad they have decommissioned now, but it's the Small HD 5.5 inch.
Oh, yes.
And I was really surprised that they discontinued it, because that has been the perfect monitor for so long now. I've had that since
I've heard a lot of good things,
2019, I think, and the sharpness is great. The peaking technology is really the definition in the peaking is really, really good. And obviously you can modify it from low to high severity. And those monitors are just fantastic. And so I'm really quite puzzled as to why they stopped. Obviously Small HD have continued to push out more monitors. I think they've, like, for me, the 5-inch is just that wee bit too small. Anything bigger, then it's too big. But so what I have is the 5.5, and for some reason, for me, personally, it fits really well. So I'm really lucky with the gear that I have, and I guess the quicker rap fire stuff is like I've got the Mavic Mini 3, I've got Miller tripods, which I believe have the best stable, smooth tripod heads over the Manfrottos. I've got some really good lights which have I don't know if I should reveal this, but I will, because I've already started the point. But I don't actually own a key light because I have survived for a very long time on these Aperture Amaran F1 lights, which are these tiny, I think it may be like 30 centimeters by
like a cube.
10.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and 3 of those, they're super, super bright, and I try to get everything packed down into one Pelican case.
Yeah,
I used to lug everything on backpacks. I don't wear backpacks anymore because I like my spine and I don't want... you know what I call what we do? I call it job security for chiropractors.
Yeah.
Because it will take a toll.
I've got a little trolley that I'll take with me.
There you go. So I like to... And so you can have all your gear, but then you come to the lights and like, oh, crap, it's not going to fit.
Yeah, I know.
And so... I've been very fortunate to be able to pack everything down, including the lights, into one Pelican case, which is, for anyone who's interested, the Pelican 1615.
Yeah,
chef's kiss.
That's
it is
good.
mint, and you have one there, which is really really good to know. So, love my gear, and it's annoying sometimes when it comes around to like tax time, and you got to find your deductions, and then you realize, but I have everything I need. I don't need to keep buying crap, and so you have to find excuses to purchase gear that you don't need, but you will eventually use. But
But you know what I've noticed? I purchase something, and then if I don't use it within a year,
you get rid of it?
Get rid of it. Just go to one marketplace and just get rid of it.
Start doing that more often.
Because I've accumulated so much crap as well.
Yes.
And it's just to a point where you just go, you know what? Like, there is a couple of, I've got, just behind you, there is a Emotimo TB3.
Oh, yes.
And if anyone knows what that is, it's an old school time-lapse
that's right.
gear, but it's such a cool little unit. I don't want to get rid of it. You know what I mean? I just love it too much. So there is certain things.
Have you used it?
Not for about a year. So, but you know what? Like, there are certain things that you kind of go, all right, I haven't used this thing for a year, just get rid of it. You know what I mean? So, 100%, man. And I mean, look, I think all of us have so much gear, and, we use most of it, but there is something.
Can I actually say, ironically, even though it's a, dominating part of this conversation, the gear is actually my least favorite part of the job.
People
flex their gear so much, and I'm like, I freaking hate lugging this stuff around. But we obviously can't do it.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, we can't do our jobs without it. And even today with the interviews, one of the interviewees was noticing me just like changing the position of the tripod, and he was like, man, there's a lot of mucking around that goes with this job, doesn't it, mate? And I was like, you're right on, because I used to be, I still feel like I'm that kid, but it's when, things like a Pelican case wasn't available at the time, and you've got like 3 bags that are, scuffled all over your shoulders and your neck, and the straps is choking you as you're trying to run for the train. Back when I didn't have a license for a car, and you feel embarrassed because all your bags are hitting the passengers, and you just feel like an absolute moron.
You know what? It builds character though. You know what I mean?
And it allows you to have conversations like this where you can look back on it and say, well, at least I'm not there now.
You know what? In the past, on the podcast episodes, we actually said, like with Evan and I, it does not matter what kind of camera you've got, essentially. You know what I mean? What matters is what you do with it. Yeah. So if you like,
which is also what the client cares about as well.
That's
they don't
exactly
give a
right.
crap about what you film.
Exactly
on.
right. Yes, it does look like, like sometimes, when you take the FX6 with a 7200 and you kind of go with a big ass, V-lock at the back as well, the client looks, oh, this is awesome gear, which is great, but like at the end of the day, if you light the subject correctly and you put the right angle on it, and if you use a 50 mil, like 1.8, which is a cheapo lens, you can get some amazing images with it. You know what I mean? And that's all you need, essentially. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the big ass camera and the lens, it establishes credibility, but for maybe like 10 seconds when you're on the job, and then it's a passing thought to the client, and all they care about is their finished product. So, and I know those. I know those guys who love to talk about
the gear,
and sometimes it can be, I mean, apart from conversations like this, because, you know, I'm in the mental space to talk about it positively, but sometimes, you know, when you're networking all the time and like it goes off and you're like, oh
Yeah.
man, you want to talk, man, I'm sick of my gear. I want to talk about something else. Do you know what I mean?
But you know what? It got to a point now where every time if we go to like a family a vacation or something, I used to always bring my, you know, big camera and 2-3 lenses and whatever else. Now, my phone and maybe a GoPro.
Great.
That's it. You know?
Well,
So
if you want a good
like
travel cam, well, that thing that you watched of my road trip,
yes,
that was filmed on a DJI Osmo Pocket.
Yeah, I've had one as well. I haven't used it for a while yet, so it went on the marketplace.
See if you can pull it out again, because again, I didn't want to do, you know, this with the phone the whole time. And it really does legit.
I think the gimbal component was something that I definitely used, and it's definitely worthwhile the money.
It's also a good camera just to have in an emergency situation where if you've packed everything up, but something happened, quickly just whip it out, film, bang. The audience doesn't know the difference between 100%. An FX3 shot and an Osmo shot, and you're done. So,
mate, we've been going for a while now.
Yeah, how long have we been going for?
Almost
5 minutes.
Yeah, it feels like it, doesn't it? But 1 hour 26 minutes.
Well, that's a good episode.
So there you go.
That's a good episode. We'll leave it there then.
Hey, how can people find you? And you know, if they want to do a doco thing with you or whatever else, hey, you know, like, what's the best way to find Curtis?
Best place to go would be www.creedmedia.com.au. Shoot me an email, give me a call. You can also find, I might as well plug my socials as well. So there's at Creed Media on Instagram as well, if you're interested to know more about the job.
That's great, man. You're obviously not very, how can I say, active on the social media component as well. And you know what? The funny thing is, I am not as well, but I've noticed that the more active you are, the more work you essentially will get, and then more people will contact you. But it's a pain in the backside, isn't it?
Yeah, running a business and running socials at the same time, it's
very hard.
Not recommended. And I've done it before where I've hired someone to do it, and it works, but then again, you're just watching your bank account drain. Yeah, and it's not cheap as well. No. So, hey, we can talk about this for a very long time, and talk under concrete, under wet concrete, as my wife says. It's great for you to come down and obviously catch up. It was great working with you today as well. It was such a great day. Such a pleasure. I think you really boosted the production by 120%. So. You put all of my shots to shame.
Oh no, not at all. It's the FPV component does sort of raise a couple of different eyebrows from a perspective of different angle, and to be able to see the things that were hanging down, and it was just such a cool thing to fly through it, you know what I mean? So,
to the client, sometimes it can look like you're pulling out this toy.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah,
because of how colourful and tiny and what looks like extremely fragile it is. But man, what a gizmo you've got there. Yeah, it's excellent. That's great fun.
And you know what? You got to learn to fly it. Yeah, mate. So if you can, mate, I'm happy to suggest a few things too. So just let me know. Anyway.
I don't know about filming through chimneys and window panels and all that. I'll leave that to the experts like yourself.
All right. Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, man.
And I will catch up with you soon, hopefully, as well. So, thank you. Ciao.
Bye, everyone. Boy.